Can any resonance exist without some discord? I would say the answer is no, if you believe in the wave function. I ask, can we have truth without the notion of fallacy, of falsity? Can we have truth without some notion of falsity? Or can we have falsity without some notion of truth? Can we have falsity without some notion of truth? I think these are probably two of the most fundamental questions. In this, I would say that truth and falsity both represent an R delta. So R delta for truth and R delta for falsity. I think that this would be a variable R delta, in that truth could take on some value in between, say, 0 and 1. Truth between 0 and 1. Falsity between 0 and 1. If I wanted to make a probability out of it. But where is the discord in a single sine wave? I'm only looking at two sine waves and looking at their interaction and saying there is some discord there that needs to be brought into resonance. But with a single wave function, the predictability of where I am is 100%. So 100% predictable. So a 100% predictable state. I really like this down here for a notion of continuity on truth values for something. And this gives me like a variable that can be somewhere between falsity and up to truth. So falsity would be our 0. So falsity is actually our 0. And then our delta can range from 0 to 1. So I think, from 0 to some R delta. 0 and R delta and 0. R delta truth ranges between 0 and R delta in 0 falsity to 0. Now I have to figure out how to prove that this gives us a continuum from 0 to R delta, or a definition for a continuum. So it looks like falsity is our discord here. So truth and falsity. The measure of falsity is the one of discord. I just don't understand how something's falsity is 0. How it can be a discord. How 0 can be equal to delta. So, how can 0 and false be taken as deltas in this case? And I'm not quite sure. For up here, I put this as a 100% predictable state. I also want to indicate that by the definitions for resonances, that's 100%. It's a 100% resonant state. And so, I guess this is a 100% resonant state, a standing wave. And then there's these complicated ones that have these deltas, these differences between them. And, this wave doesn't go here and this one does go here. And how do we talk about when one thing does one thing and another does another? How do we treat those in combining them as deltas? And what happens when they cross each other? And I think those are some of the discrete questions of discord. So I'd like to introduce this. I'll call this, this will be star 2, and this will be star 1. Okay. Star 2 is 100% resonant. I'm going to end this right now with saying that it looks like this would be considered 100% perfect resonance. And this over here would have discords that are captured by the diagram in 1. And that's just where I'm going to end for now, since I don't really know where to go in this exploration anymore. One last thing I want to note is that I started out treating this like a probability, and then I stopped doing it as I didn't say that this down here was equal to R delta minus 1. So if I take this R delta to be, so I'm assuming we live in a universe where objects have some structure. And when they have that structure, we have to ask the question of what does it mean for there to be a lack of structure. So I would say that the natural pairing of the R delta and delta, the natural pairing between the delta as truth and the, so we take R as truth, R as truth, and we take delta as not truth. And right then we're already building in operators, so I don't know. I do feel like I'm missing some system that gives me complete resonance without there ever having been discord. And that's the question I'm struggling with. Is there any system that is just resonance, that doesn't have any discords between each other? I guess that would be two identical waves. But those two would have to, you'd have to deal with the question of what happens when waves overlap. And for that, you need to define some measure on adding functions together. So you need to find some measure on adding functions together, and that's your delta, is your measure for adding functions together. So delta is measure for adding functions in all cases. So delta is a measure for adding functions. And we're trying to pick a really closely related delta for some R. And I guess for every R, there is some closely related delta. And that is the first foyer from something being a discord to being a resonance. So the question of can we have some resonance without some discord, I would have to say that the answer is yes. And that is just the most sensible thing in the simplest cases, is that it is an entirely resonant state, is it is in 100% agreement with itself somehow. Although I would argue that discord itself needs a natural pairing, and that pairing would be resonance. Although I would argue that discord needs a natural pairing, and for that natural pairing you would pick resonance.